Welcome to Legacy Elevated. We are here to equip, empower, and inspire the next generation through business and community leaders. Legacy Elevated will revolutionize your business beyond the P&L to further shape your identity as a company and your evolution as a brand. Legacy Elevated focuses on global impact you can have by being hyper-local in charity and community while living with your future legacy in mind.
On Legacy Elevated today, we're here with Ron Florence. I'm excited about it. I've had the opportunity to know Ron for multiple decades now, and even to see you transition from one career to the next and be able to make an influence, a lasting legacy everywhere you go. And we're excited to uncover that today, to learn more about not just Ron Florence, but about that positive wake that you've created everywhere you've been. Welcome, Ron.
Thanks for having me. It's always a pleasure to be around the Nellis Group. I find that everything is great and better with great partners like yourself. Appreciate your friendship over, I think, now 3 different decades. Wow. And everything that your family and your team has done for our family.
Yeah, thank you. Well, let's dive right in and talk about, tell me where you went to college, what you studied, and then what you went right into.
So I was fortunate enough to go to Ohio State University. Grew up outside Cincinnati, always watching them on football, and that was just kind of the dream. And luckily, the Navy made that possible. So graduated with a Bachelor of Science in Business Administration with a focus on marketing. And once I graduated college, I got my commission in the Navy, and I went off to flight school and started what I thought was going to be a brief time of military service. But loved it so much, loved the people, loved the mission, loved the serving that it provided. I just could not give it up.
Yeah, and thankfully I'm a Navy brat, so I had that experience growing up with it. Within the Navy, tell me, what did you fly?
So I started off in flight school. Just they train you both in with the T-34 Mentor, which is a single-engine prop plane, and then once I selected for helicopters, Bell Jet Ranger. And then my first fleet aircraft was the SH-2F Sea Sprite. It was a pre-Vietnam kind of design. Wow. And I think we might be shaving with them today. But I started with the H-2 Sea Sprite. I transitioned to the H-60 Seahawk. Most people are familiar with the Black Hawk version that the Army flies. Both aircraft were light airborne multi-purpose systems, so anti-submarine warfare, anti-surface warfare, search and rescue, humanitarian assistance, air-to-surface kind of weaponry, and then a lot of counter-drug operations. So that was my helicopter career, and then about 10 or 11 years, I was looking for an opportunity to kind of chase something else, and the Navy gave me an opportunity to transition to fixed wing, so I went to fly in the logistics community. I flew C-130Ts, the Mighty Hercules. Great plane, loved it, allowed me to fly on 6 different continents and just meet and serve the Navy, the rest of the Department of Defense, and so many different remote areas. And then my last tour was flying over to Andrews Air Force Base. I flew the Gulfstream 550, the 5, and the 3, which is a small business jet. We were the pilots for the Secretary of the Navy, the Commandant of the Marine Corps, the Chief of Naval Operations, and the rest of our 4-star leadership here in Washington, D.C.
Wow. Well, let me pause by saying thank you for your service.
Well, it's my pleasure.
It's an amazing thing for the people that take their time and sacrifice with both family and career, right, to keep our country free. Tell me about, we're going to talk today about leadership and in your prior career, which you just mentioned, and in your current career, and we want to dive deeper. Tell me what leadership looks like when you're actively flying and kind of the people around you and what that looks like to be the pilot.
So leadership, I think in general, has a lot of the same attributes or characteristics, but when you're flying, I think it's the person who is kind of getting the team together. So I was fortunate enough to fly in an aircraft that were multi-crew. Some people are a leader of one. Some of our aircraft are just one people. And sometimes in a noisy environment, a fast environment, a challenging environment where you're trying to outpace your adversary, there can be different opinions and there can be different ways of applying tactics. And how do you understand, first of all, what the strengths and maybe some weaknesses of people on your team, and how would you apply them in a certain mission set? Safety is always rule one, and so everybody kind of has an equal vote on that. So kind of establishing, hey, from a safety perspective, everybody has a vote. We're going to follow the one that is the one that we feel like is the best. There's no rank with safety. So if somebody sees something is not right, just because I'm the aircraft commander doesn't mean we're going to go do it. Like if you have an issue. So you kind of, I think part of that leadership is laying the groundwork of, hey, we all need to work together. We do have ranks. We are professional, but we have a mission together. We got to collaborate. So I think establishing a collaboration kind of environment. And then I think at the end of the day, somebody has to be able to make the call. So having that environment where you can listen, take that input, and then as the leader, kind of like saying, okay, this is what we're going to do. Getting that feedback from your team, kind of cross-checking it, and then kind of putting it into action. So it seems very easy to talk about it here at the table when you have plenty of time, but there have been a few scenarios where, yeah, you might have 25 seconds, 30 seconds, and you're trying to make decision. I think that's one thing naval aviation does is they train you well as a leader to react with those with procedures and systems and the integration of the crew where you respect people for the talents they bring and how they can actually get you to your inset or your end game.
Yeah, I love that. There's no rank with safety. There was even a book by Malcolm Gladwell called The Outliers. Did you ever hear of that book?
I did.
Did you read it?
I did.
Okay. And you may or may not remember they were talking about airlines and with certain customs with different ethnicities where someone, part of the crew, didn't feel the right or ability to question the top pilot. So I love to hear that that's not the way that it worked where you flew. Talk about the transition from being a pilot. Did you spend time in the military where you weren't flying?
So you will have periods of your career where you may go do a non-flying assignment. So I had the opportunity to do 5 Pentagon assignments. I guess I didn't get it right the first, second, third, or fourth time, so they kept sending me back. And it's really what I would call a broadening tour, which kind of sets you up for your next step in aviation leadership. So for me, I had opportunities to do non-flying assignments, working personnel, developing people, kind of human resources, getting them in the right job. So I did placement for putting people in assignments at the White House, the Joint Staff, Secretary of Defense's office. Very interesting places in knowing what they need and working with those high-level officials to try to understand what their requirements are. I worked on aircraft acquisition and program management where we're buying planes and getting them into production and getting them to the fleet so people can fly their missions. And then I've had the opportunity to help run larger staffs, one over in Naples, Italy, which would be the Naval Forces Europe and Africa staff. So all the operations on 2 continents. And then my last tour in the Pentagon, working for the Chief of Naval Reserves. So what that would entail is a force of about 70,000 naval reservists and policies, resourcing, and trying to make sure that everybody in that force has what they need to do in order to meet their missions.
And how many years total in the Navy did you have?
So almost 29. So it's about
Wow.
about 27 months, somewhere around there.
Almost
not
3
counting.
decades.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. So let's, from perspective of leadership and the leader that you were 29 years later versus the leader that you came into the Navy with, if you could go back to that young Ron Florence and give them 2 key principles on leadership within the scope of the military and specifically the Navy, what would you tell them?
So I think the first thing I'd say is try to understand what the difference is between leadership and management. What's a leader and what's a manager? I think at times we confuse the two. Even today, there are some times where I feel like I'm a leader of a business. I may be in a manager mindset, and I feel like knowing and understand what those parameters are and kind of giving yourself some guardrails so you don't fall into that not only makes you a better leader, but it gives your team opportunities to take those challenges and do it themselves and grow them. So I think that would probably be one of the first things. And I put this in a framework of, the concepts of leadership and how to lead things have changed through the decades. I'll never forget when total quality leadership rolled out, and the guy in front of me he was a lieutenant commander and I was a lieutenant junior grade, and they were talking about getting in touch with people and getting inputs and this and that. And I'll never forget the guy turned around and looked at me and goes, "Hey, don't worry. We're here for the lecture. We're not actually applying this. So you're still a lieutenant junior grade." And that's just the way it was. Yeah. So I think for me, the second thing would be don't be afraid to be yourself and take some risks. I think too many times we subvert kind of maybe things we can bring to the table, or maybe not reach the results we want because maybe we don't think our idea is good. Maybe we doubt ourselves a little bit. But the other thing is just kind of being bold and not being afraid to make a mistake, because making that mistake in a sense will make you better. There's always calculated risk. Like, you don't want to jump off a cliff and say, "Hey, I'm going to just try this out." But I think taking those risks early and learning early is the only way to go.
Love it. Yeah, and so if we have listeners of all age groups to this, and if someone is thinking, "Hey, maybe the military's for me," can you give us an example of who's the perfect fit for the military today in 2021?
So I think the perfect fit is somebody who has a heart to serve, somebody who wants to be challenged, not only physically, not only mentally, but in relationships, like learning, trying to go through and learn and get things done in a dynamic environment with a diverse group of people, and trying to get an outcome that you may be resourced for or not. There's a lot of challenges with budgets these days, but I think somebody who wants a challenge, has a passion to work with other teams, and has a passion to serve. I was a guy who grew up around farms my whole life. I think I had 2 stoplights. There was not anybody in my family who'd served in the military, and I was always intrigued by it. I saw shows on it. I was definitely probably not the poster board person to go into the military, but I got a taste of it and I loved it. So I think, somebody who wants to serve, somebody who wants to work on challenging things with teams, and wants to just get after it, because there are great opportunities for military service. And it can be for 4 years or it can be for 30. You get to make the call.
Yeah. So let's talk transition and leadership and what that looks like. So you're almost at 30 years, and then you got to decide what now, right?
Exactly.
Walk us through that process of you honing your own leadership skills to figure out what's next. And so if someone maybe is in between careers right now and they're trying to think of what should I do next, can you walk us through what you thought mentally? How do I establish what's next?
So I would tell you my transition was probably a session of 2 or 3. There were a couple times I was considering transitioning, and I just backed my way out of it. So once was at year 10. I thought I was going to go to law school.
Oh, wow.
I had a great plan to go to law school, and then we thought differently. We thought maybe we should do another tour or 2. But I think the transition is when the importance of a transition is when you feel like you're drawn or you have a passion to serve in another way, and you can take the things you've learned and apply it. So in my case, right, I was looking for something very different. Normally they will tell you to transition to an area that you have a specialty in, but in a lot of ways I did have experience. So it was leading in a business environment, but it was in a totally different industry. So that transition, I underestimated it. Like, I thought, wow, I've been through a lot in my life. I have a lot of skill sets. I'm just going to transition in. And I think the thing about it is you got to be truthful to yourself and who you are. So I think I underestimated a little bit. If I were to do it differently, I went to a lot of transition classes, but I don't think that makes you do the rigor and the deep thought you really need to do, like what is in your heart. Like, I've seen my friends doing this, and I had some friends doing that, and they're telling me to do this. I think the person who wants to make a really good transition has to examine like what their skill sets are and what's in their heart and what do they want to do. It's got to be a very deliberate, focused, and again, be ready to make mistakes. when you veer off the road a little bit, and just be prepared for that, because that's what transitions are. They're kind of somewhat controlled disruptions in your life. And, when you go off the road a little bit, you just got to figure out a way to calmly get back on the road and always push forward.
So let's talk about skill set and passion. Tell me, as a leader and developing other leaders underneath you, how do you fuel that, or how do you fan that passion for people that work with you?
So I would say for me, it goes back to when I was in high school, when I had a vice principal, Mr. David O'Toole, who is known for being the disciplinarian. And he had a heart for helping people in challenging spots. And I was looking for a way to go to college. And one day he pulled me in and he introduced me to this idea of the military and scholarships and what it could do for me. I saw him do that to countless kids. And to me, his heart for serving those people and getting them on a track, he'll never know what he has done for the world. And I think that's where I got it from. I don't think you appreciate it when you're younger. It's like, he's just doing his job. But I think that's what it's all about. Like, how do you help somebody get to where they want to go? And for me, it starts with trying to find somebody who's open to it and they want to explore what that looks like. So a lot of people, I don't know. Well, it's okay not to know. Let's talk about what you don't know. I think that's the first part. So getting in and getting into a point of discovery with somebody and trying to feel out, like, if they don't know, what could it be? Getting into a small subset. And then I think the second thing is being committed to being on that journey with them. Like, what does this mean? It's not a sit-down one-time conversation. It could be a lot of different conversations. It could be, I'm going to go down this road, and maybe that road leads them from you. And you don't want to lose great people in your life, but sometimes maybe that's the segment of their life that you're serving in, and you launch them on that. So I think, like, it's a commitment to somebody, but it's also a commitment of helping them discover what that looks like. Because I think a lot of people, even myself when I transitioned, I wasn't completely sure if I knew 100% that I was doing the right thing. And I think sometimes still today I go, was that the right thing? I don't know.
Yeah, and even that selfless part of it. You just many leaders aren't like that, where you develop a person and you have so much time on task that you want to keep them. You want them to stay within your empire, right? Because they're perhaps a future empire builder for you. How do you know that you shouldn't keep them there?
I think part of it is when you see them doing something because they have to. I think you've just got to be honest and have that conversation with them. Like, you can see, like, maybe they're not as energetic or as enthusiastic, or something that they're just doing to do. Because I think there's enough stuff out there that people can do things just to do that is closer to their passion. So I think that's the first thing, is you notice maybe either a change in demeanor, the way they're doing things. Like, I hate to use the word happiness, but maybe we use the word joy, right? There's a lack of joy. I think that, so not having somebody do something because they have to. I think the second thing is when somebody doesn't have hope in that situation. Like, for example, I don't see a future in this, or I don't see opportunity. I don't see myself being there. Like, I think it's okay to be in places for seasons, or you could see yourself being there 20 years. But I think, to me, if somebody has lost that excitement or that enthusiasm, or somebody has lost hope, maybe it's time to help them find something different, because it's not necessarily them. It just might be their situation.
Yeah, and you just funneled so many key words when it comes to passion, right? Hope, future, opportunity, and whether or not they can have that within your business. So you spent almost 3 decades learning and developing leaders, becoming a leader yourself. You transitioned into the corporate world outside of the military. Give me a lesson you hadn't learned yet, and it just smacked you. You're like, oh, wow, I wish I'd known that. This is a new skill that I have to develop as a result of my new career.
So I think over time you create your own biases and things that you know. And I will tell you, especially when you switch industries, you cannot apply that probably as liberally as you think you could. So I would tell you that I feel like my example would be, don't assume that people want things in a certain way or value things the way that others do. I think it's important to ask them. So I'll give you a great example. My first restaurant, we were closed on Thanksgiving, and our biggest business day was on Black Friday. And we made it so that nobody had to work on Thursday because I wanted everybody to enjoy Thanksgiving. And my sons and I were going to go in and work at the restaurant, so nobody had to. And somebody found out that we were coming in and working on Thursday, and they were like, well, why are you going to work on Thursday? I said, well, we want everybody to have a great Thanksgiving, this and that. It never occurred to me that somebody might want to come in and actually work and earn some money, or maybe Thanksgiving wasn't as big, and they thought they could bring value, and they didn't want us to have to come into work. So they were like, well, we'd rather come in and work. Can we have the keys and we'll come in and work? So to me, that was an example that I would have never seen. So I think you need to ask and try to understand from somebody's like face-to-face kind of interaction. Like ask them, like, is this important to you? Because for some people it may not be. There are other examples, but I think sometimes you've worked with enough people that you feel like, I know what this situation is going to be, or I know how somebody would value that. I don't think, especially in the workplace today in the environment, you really need to have a key understanding of what the people on your team value and what drives them, because it probably is not going to be what exactly you think it is.
Yeah, it's a surprise, right?
Right.
So if we're looking at both careers and you're in the middle of your second one, what have you learned, or someone that's listening here, they're thinking about their transition, they're thinking about a new industry, perhaps what are two things they should really hone in on before they jump?
So the world is just this plethora of information and resources out there. And I think the first thing you need to do before you get into any transition or starting something new is I would talk with people who've been there. Not only who've been doing it for a long time, but somebody who's recently made that transition to fully understand, maybe not necessarily whether you want to do it or not, or maybe that could be part of it, but how to do it successfully. Because really the people who've gone down the path before you, the first person that goes through the wall gets the bloodiest, right? So the goal would be to kind of not be as bloody as them when you're going through the wall. So asking them and kind of getting those lessons, creating relationships because they've been there before you. So that is something that Chick-Fil-A and the operators in our community are very good at. So I think that was really key to my transition. And then I think probably the second thing would be in a transition is deciding what your non-negotiables are when you make the transition. Like, I want it to be this, and I want it to be this, and I want it to be this, and I'm not going to negotiate on it. And that could be a number of different things. And there will be plenty of challenges and changes that will there will be detours that you are not expecting that will happen, and you need to be ready for those. It's just the way it's going to be. There's going to be mistakes. There's going to be tons of things you don't know. But I would tell folks, decide what's really important to you, come up with your 2 or 3 non-negotiables, like I'm sticking to this no matter what, and then move forward.
So our podcast is called Legacy Elevated, and it's really about leaving a legacy and imprinting on people that you're in leadership over. If we would go back and talk to people that served under you in the Navy or people that serve under you right now in the restaurant business, what would you want them to say about your leadership? And what do you think they would say about the legacy that Ron Florence is leaving behind?
So I think what they would say about my leadership would be that I have very high expectations, but they're fair. So I'm a pretty transparent guy. I've been accused of wearing my heart on my sleeves. And I think in a lot of cases, I think we're afraid to do that in leadership, but I think it's important. So for me, I explain it not only as an important for the business for me, but really them. Like when the business thrives, we all thrive. And the other thing is So our team growing and coaching people to high standards is really about developing and helping them progress, because we're not helping people unless we're helping them grow, not only in our organization, but their skill set. So I think high expectations, but fair. I would say that people would say that I lead the business with an open book. So I'm not afraid to talk about decisions. I'm not afraid to talk about the metrics. I'm not afraid to teach them how to run the business so they can be successful with that. So I think transparency is really key. And then I think the third thing they would say is that we would value people maybe over business results. And that is not always the case. I think that I probably, on our staff, when I came to our new business, we probably have about 8 people that have been with me for the entire time I've been a Chick-Fil-A operator, which means a lot to me. And in a world, in that industry where the turnover is very high, that might be the greatest achievement of our business, is the team we keep stacking together and showing them the opportunity there. And then I think that they are learning that leadership and adapting it to how they work with their people. So I think taking care of their people and knowing that the benefits are coming around. Maybe next week, maybe in a year. Who knows?
I love it. I love it. Let me challenge you with this. If your tombstone or epitaph had to be written tomorrow, they call it the dash you live between, right? The year that you were born and the year that the good Lord takes you. What would you want written on it?
Man, you got some really just soft questions here. I think for me, I would want it to say faithful servant, husband, father, and provider. Provider meaning not necessarily for my family, but for the people that I've interacted with in my life.
I love it. I love it. For being put on the spot, that is fantastic. We're going to put you on the spot with something fun. We call it a buzz round.
Okay.
And I'm going to pull up the questions, and it's fun. Here's what you're going to have to do. You're going to have to come up with whatever comes first in your mind.
Okay.
So I'm going to say it. You pop right in. You can't think about it. Are you ready?
Yep.
Favorite season?
Fall.
Favorite musical artist?
Sammy Hagar.
Favorite song?
Bohemian Rhapsody.
No. A favorite cartoon?
Bugs Bunny.
Favorite movie?
Moneyball.
Favorite book?
Golly.
First thing.
Favorite book? Outlier, probably Outlier.
Nice. Favorite podcast?
James Nellis.
Yes, Legacy Elevated. No, so that was a soft pitch right there. Favorite president?
Ronald Reagan.
And favorite quote?
I don't know if it's a quote, but probably John 3:16.
And that is?
For he who loves the Lord and Savior, for whoever believes in him will have everlasting life.
Love it, love it. And if you've ever been to a football game or watched one on TV, you'll probably saw that in the audience, right?
Yep.
So if you don't know it, go check out John 3:16. Ron, thank you for being here with us to talk about Legacy Elevated, what it means to leave a legacy, to leave that positive wake, both through the military career and your current career in the restaurant business. It's a delight to know you and to be able to share your wisdom with others.
James, thanks for having me. Thanks for everything your team and your family has done for our community and my family, and hope you have a great week.
Thank you for joining us for the Legacy Elevated podcast, where we reveal the ways to impact the world and leave a legacy that empowers the next generation. Follow us at Legacy Elevated on YouTube and Instagram, and if you have a business that can inspire others, reach out to us today.